Hey guys, it's Candace.
And it's Elena.
And you're listening to Cousins on Crime.
I'm good.
Girl, you got a blowout over there.
You noticed, huh?
You're blown out.
I actually did something
nice
with myself, yes.
I mean, whatever you're doing, it's working. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But what about me? Do you like my greasy hair and my glasses?
Well, it doesn't look greasy. I like the color, actually. You've got that nice halo shine, from the light above.
Oh, yeah. Yes, my boob light in the closet. Oh, man. Well, Lena, we're just going to get down to it.
Let's
we're
go.
Go down a rough road. Yeah.
Oh.
It's going to be rough. The case I have for you tonight is a doozy. I mean, when is it not?
Right. Usually
when
is.
When is it not?
Mm.
Yeah. It's a story that I wish I didn't have to tell, but here we are. I actually started working on the story several months ago, like when we first started the podcast. But I put it aside because it just made my skin crawl, and I couldn't. The more I did research on it, the more I was like, I gotta get this off of my plate.
Okay.
I just couldn't. But let's do it and get it over with.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
As Hazel would say. Sound good? I'll have a donut. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay. Little side note, we got Dunkin' Donuts yesterday morning, a special treat, and she got to have a pink sprinkled donut.
Oh, was it her first?
No.
Oh.
She's had donuts before, but we don't get them like all the time.
Gotcha.
So she had a pink donut, and then I went upstairs to do some work. Daniel was downstairs, and he let her kind of roam around, and, it's quiet.
Uh-oh.
And then he goes out there, and she has white powder all over her mouth. She had eaten a whole nother donut and then half of another donut.
Wow.
So 1.5 more donuts. And she was tweaking. I mean...
Did she have a crash later?
No. I think kids just...
Keep going.
Yeah, I guess. She never has that much sugar, so...
Yeah.
I was like... Oh, and she ate gum yesterday, too. She got in my purse and ate some gum. So... it was a great day for her,
She was being
wise,
sneaky, wasn't she?
She was. Well, we sometimes let her just kind of hang out, not in the playroom.
Oh, okay.
And she does really well. She's very independent, but no more. After the gum incident, that's it.
Yeah.
She lost that privilege.
Girl.
Anyway, let's go back down the dark path.
I don't know if I want to.
Sadly, not much is known about the victims in this case because when we have like a sensational murder, that tends to sweep over all the victims' information and their background, especially when you are like, how could someone do this? Then you want to dive into their past and like get to know why they are this way. So I'll tell you what I know about the victims, but for the most part, we're going to get to know the murderer, unfortunately.
Okay.
A little bit more than we want to. So Stephen Sean Griffiths was born December 24th, 1969 in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, which is in northern England. Oh. His father, Stephen Griffiths Sr., was a frozen food salesman. I guess that was a thing. And his mother, Moira Dewhurst, was a telephonist. So she worked the switchboards back in the day when that was a thing. Kids these days have no idea that you used to have to pick up a landline and someone would connect a call for you. It wouldn't just, you couldn't just dial a number and it would ring.
You'd have to call the operator.
Exactly. You'd have to call the operator. But Stephen had 2 siblings, those poor people. And after his parents divorced, the 3 children went to live full-time with their mother. Stephen was sent to a public fee-paying school when he was 13 years old. I think that's like a private school. I asked Daniel and he really didn't know. So it sounds like a private school because it's something that you have to pay for.
Right.
And obviously, just like here, public school, you don't have to pay for. But it's something that his dad actually saved up for to send him to. So he completed school, but he didn't complete his A-levels. And those are like foundational exams for like higher education. If you wanted to go to university, you would complete your A-levels before going to university. But they're not required to like graduate from high school, so to speak.
Okay.
So at that time, he did finish high school, but he didn't have plans to go to university right away. He was actually more interested in a life of crime. Isn't that surprising? He began committing petty crimes, and isn't that always how it starts?
Yep.
The gateway. Shoplifting, theft, but it quickly escalated to violence when it needed to. He realized that violence did something for him. And he found this out at age 17 when he assaulted a grocery store manager by slashing his face with a knife.
Why?
Unnecessary, I say. He got 3 years. He got 3 years in jail for that. Reportedly, while he was in custody, he told psychiatrists and prison guards that he had fantasies about being a serial killer.
Oh my gosh.
He said he'd killed animals and eaten a live rat.
Oh.
Yeah, gross.
Okay, wait. Did this man that his throat was slashed, did he live?
His face was slashed, and he did live.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, he slashed his face with a knife.
I misunderstood.
don't know. I don't have the details about that particular robbery. The media more so fixates on his later crimes, and you'll see why.
But this is where it just started.
Right, and he only got 3 years in jail for that, which, I mean, come on. But he actually idolized Peter Sutcliffe. Do you know that name?
I am not familiar.
He was the Yorkshire Ripper.
Oh, okay. I've heard that name, but I didn't know that was okay.
So he not only said that he fantasized about being a serial killer, he was obsessed with serial killers. Well, you know what? Even that admission in prison, they set him free when his term was up. They're like, oh, that's cute. You want to be a serial killer? Okay.
What in the
Go
world?
do that then.
I mean,
I guess letting monsters back out on the street isn't exclusive to the U.S.
Okay, if you don't want to hold him in prison, like, okay, he was sentenced to 3 years, he's finished his 3, but there's something wrong here. Let's send him to a mental institution.
Right. Well, and he saw psychiatrists while he was
Exactly.
in prison. And he was evaluated, and they did note his particular fantasies, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no idea how that works, but...
yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, in 1989, he was slapped with community service when he got caught with an air pistol. You see, he liked to shoot birds and dissect them, which... classic psychopath behavior right there. And according to reports, there wasn't a whole lot of follow-up with him as far as monitoring. They let him out. They had noted these disturbing things that he was saying, and then they just let him fly free. So I'm not sure what was going on there or how he acquired an air pistol, because you can't just carry one around in public in England. I mean, this is the U.S., and you could go to Walmart and buy a gun, but in the U.K., it is certainly not like that. So I don't know how he acquired it, how he was allowed to carry it around, But he got caught and really just got a slap on the wrist because he got community service. But 5 years later, his bum would be right back in jail for holding a knife to a woman's throat. So he just kept on keeping on his violent ways. But he was only there for a couple more years. And again, another country who apparently doesn't mind a repeat violent offender walking amongst the general public. So he was let back out. And then by 1991, Stephen had been diagnosed a schizoid psychopath. Now, I'm not sure at what point he acquired this diagnosis. I don't know if it was in prison when he was being seen by psychiatrists or whatnot. But here in the U.S., that's actually not a diagnosis that we use, especially these days. We've come a long way from the early 90s when it comes to mental health. So perhaps that was and maybe still is a thing in the UK. We do have a diagnosis of schizoid personality disorder, which is not the same thing as schizophrenia, by the way. It sounds like it. But and of course, we have psychopathy. And from these diagnoses, let me just describe this guy to you since we don't have the schizoid psychopath. So with regard to SPD, which is the schizoid personality disorder, they can be eccentric. And what I mean is they can be like peculiar or odd. And it doesn't necessarily put people off when it comes to contact with them. You know, we all know people who are a little bit weird, you know, like they dress weird, they kind of act weird, but they're relatively harmless. You know, we wouldn't be afraid of them. It's only when other traits start to emerge that SPD can become problematic. These people are usually able to function pretty well and like hold a job down. They're generally indifferent in social relationships and are pretty detached from society in general. So while they may hold jobs down, they're often working in positions like alone for the most part, like overnight security or working in a warehouse, a library, you know, things like that where they wouldn't really have to be in contact with people too much.
Gotcha.
But there is his psychopathic side. So while the SPD side doesn't sound so bad, we know more about psychopaths than we probably care to, Lena. So they have that superficial charm, that grandiose sense of self, and much like SPD, they have a lack of affect or emotional depth. So that's where that, you know, when it comes to commission of crimes, they have no remorse. They feel nothing whatsoever. And they already have that detachment from people as it is. So that's like a ticking time bomb. You know. So Stephen may have kept to himself, and he did for the most part. But when it mattered, when he needed to interact with people, he was able to turn on that little bit of charm that he had. He actually, in 2001, had a girlfriend named Kathy, and according to her, he was really possessive and controlling. He isolated her from her family and friends. And actually, one evening, he and Kathy were having a cup of tea, and he started laughing, just like out of nowhere. And she's like, "Why are you laughing?" And he said, "You're dying."
Oh.
And he told her that he spiked her tea with poison.
No.
And she was like, "You're nuts by now." They hadn't been dating very long. It was like a couple of weeks. So like, did he or did he not? But he was really awkward, didn't really know how to have a romantic relationship. And he used that little bit of charm in other areas too, because he ended up earning a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Oh my goodness.
From the University of Bradford in 2003.
How
and
interesting.
Then he was accepted into a PhD program, Lena, with a specialization in homicides.
What?
The following year.
What?
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
Getting into a PhD program is so hard. You have to have the grades, and then you have to have really high test scores. I don't know how it is in the UK, but here you have to have high GPA, high GRE, and you have to pass 1 or 2 interviews. So he must have been smart as well as every other thing. And I guess they didn't do background checks on him because he had been in prison twice and obviously had a violent past.
It was basically a game to him. Like he's like, let me see how far I can go so I can see what I can get away with here whenever I do plan on murdering someone.
Exactly. He was obsessed, and he was very interested in the history of crime.
Mm-hmm.
He particularly compared 19th century and modern murder techniques. That's what he was interested in studying. And I feel like if they had done a background check, I think that criminal history might have played into whether or not they would let someone into a PhD program to study murder. I don't know.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know.
Mm-mm.
You know, this is giving Brian Koberger vibes. The alleged
yes.
killer of the Moscow, Idaho students.
Right.
This is along the same lines. Someone who's like obsessed with it. Although I think Brian Koberger's motives were a little bit different. I think he wanted to do something and get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think he probably fantasized about that for a really long time.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Yeah, it's giving Brian Koberger vibes. And a little side, do you recognize the name of that university he went to? Bradford University?
Yeah.
That was the university where Professor Hugh Gale ran that facial recognition software.
Oh, okay.
On that guy that lived in Australia who was allegedly Lord Lucan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, same university. Little link there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're lost, we did an episode on Lord Lucan, so you can go listen to that. So Stephen was obsessed with serial killers, and he studied the history of serial killing. For instance, he knew when the term serial killer was developed by the FBI, and the criteria that had to be met to be categorized as a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
Most people would want to know sports statistics, but Stephen was more interested in things like this, murder statistics, I guess.
Jeez.
And countless reports speak to how active he was on the dark side of the World Wide Web.
Mm-hmm.
He had a MySpace page.
MySpace.
And his bio at one point said, quote, "Hatred bound tightly in flesh."
Ooh.
And I mean, if that doesn't get you friend requests, I don't know what will. He was really into violent pornography, and he used the pseudonym Ven Pariah when posting really dark and cryptic messages on his page, like, here's one. "Humanity is not merely a biological condition. It is also a state of mind. On that basis, I am a pseudo-human being at best.
Oh, jeez.
A demon at worst."
Well, yeah, I mean, I could agree with the demon
Stephen,
part.
whatever you say. Yeah, he is a demon. He wore a leather trench coat and sunglasses at all times, regardless of the weather. And this is good. This is going to give you a visual. He had pet lizards. And he would walk them around on leashes.
Okay.
He even took them to nightclubs with him sometimes.
What?
So you can see how people around town thought he was freaking weird.
Yeah.
There's the lizard guy. In fact, people did call him the Lizard Man because he walked lizards. And, the trench coat, the sunglasses, that's the eccentric side of his personality that people found harmless,
Yeah.
So, and people really just chalked it up. They thought he was just like an odd duck. Classic schizoid personality trait.
Mm-hmm.
Weird dude, non-threatening. Well, so they thought. But not so fast, because in May of 2010, I had just left England at that point. I lived in England when some of these crimes occurred, and I vaguely remember them being talked about.
Interesting.
In the news there. But by May of 2010, 36-year-old Susan Blaymeyers a Bradford sex worker had gone missing one weekend. And she wasn't the first, actually. 2 others had gone missing the previous year. And this trend might have continued if it weren't for a care worker that was checking some CCTV footage from the previous weekend.
Good old CCTV.
Oh, CCTV, it'll get you every time, I say.
Yeah.
She queued up the video, and she sees this woman running from a flat, scared out of her mind, when a man catches up with her and knocks her out.
Oh.
She, bam, goes to the floor.
Oh, my gosh.
That man was Stephen Griffiths. Once he clocked her and she fell to the ground, Stephen kind of walked away and out of frame for a few moments. And before that care worker could catch her breath, he reappears in frame with a crossbow.
What?
And shot the woman through the head with a crossbow. That's right.
In the middle of the streets.
In the middle of the the flat corridor.
Right.
So there was like a CCTV camera in the hallway of his flat.
In the hallway. Good Lord.
And this is how it all went down. There's a video of it. I didn't see the part where he shoots her through the head, but I did see the part where he
knocked her out.
Well, I'll tell you in a second. So he drags the woman's lifeless body out of sight and down the hallway. But then he comes back down the hallway and notices that there's a camera. And so he flips the bird to the camera, which is so chilling because he's like looking right at the camera and he's like, yeah, just murdered someone. And what?
Right.
Ugh. So it's usually about now when someone who just witnessed what they did would call police and report what they just saw, right? But this lady was like, you know what? I need to make a phone call first to the Sun newspaper and tell them what I just saw. Then I'll call police.
Do what?
So that's what she did. She called and sold her story. And then she called the police. Well, police acted really fast. And they immediately got to Stephen and arrested him. Police and over 40 detectives fanned out across the city. They didn't find a body, so they're looking for the woman. They don't know where he put her. There was a river nearby, so there were police divers searching the river air, and construction sites were searched, like the roadworks were dug up, other areas around Stephen's flat. And they ended up carting wheelbarrows full of evidence away from his flat. One report said they found remnants of the victim's body.
Oh.
Remnants. And they found a photograph of the victims before, during, and after they were killed in his bathtub.
Oh,
so,
goodness.
While in custody, Stephen admitted to killing Susan Blaemeyers and the 2 other sex workers that had gone missing in 2009, Susan Rushworth and Shelley Armitage. He also claimed to have killed, quote, loads of other women, but he was never able to give names or dates or any other details that would substantiate that claim. He was just trying to, he just wanted people to think that he had been doing this a lot longer than he had.
Right.
So the previous year, in April of 2009, Shelley Armitage was last seen in Allerton, which is a village in Bradford. And CCTV had caught her walking along a street, and then she kind of turned around at the end of the street and came back up the way she came. I'm not sure if she was soliciting for work at this time or not, but that was really the last sighting of her. She was 31 years old, and she actually dreamed of becoming a model someday. I know it's easy to judge women who turn to sex work, but we really have no idea what they've gone through, where they came from that could have led them to this type of work.
Right.
But she did have ambitions for her life, and she never got that chance. Her friend, Lindsay Barron, said they met in college, and they both kind of fell into the wrong crowd and started doing drugs. And unlike Lindsay, Shelley was really never able to break free from that cycle. So when Shelley didn't show up for 2 back-to-back court appearances, I don't know what they were for, but she also wasn't claiming her government benefits, red flags went up.
Exactly.
Her friend Lindsay said she grew really concerned because she wasn't answering her phone, and that just wasn't like her to be out of touch. Then, a couple months later in June, Susan Rushworth, also a sex worker, went missing. Susan, she went by Susie, was 43, and she was really trying to figure out her life at this time. At this specific time in her life, she had been addicted to heroin for a really long time, but had sought professional help, and she was actually clean for 5 weeks.
Oh.
So she had been really trying here. You know, she had 3 children. 2 of them were actually in their 20s, so grown. The other one was 9 years old. And she was very close with her kids. They were so proud of her for, you know, cleaning herself up. Again, we don't know why she was still doing sex work. We don't know. But the last day she was seen by 2 of her children, she went shopping and bought some clothes and told her kids that she'd be back in about an hour. And that was around noon on June 22nd, 2009. And that was the last they would ever see of their mother. When Susan Rushworth went missing, her kids were understandably distraught. She had her struggles in the past, but she had never gone unaccounted for. She'd always come back home, no matter how high on drugs she may have been at the time. She never just disappeared. So her son James said she was doing so well and staying clean, and they were proud of her, and this just was not like her. She also had grandchildren, and because she had recently gotten clean, she was just getting to know her grandkids, and they were like what she was living for. She was so excited to spend more time with them. And one more thing that sent her family spiraling was that she was epileptic. So she needed medication to function, and they knew she didn't have it on her. The kids never stopped appealing to the public for any information as to her whereabouts, and they never gave up finding out what happened to her, no matter how bad they were starting to think that this might be. But they could have never imagined what they would learn about their mother's disappearance. So, with regard to Susan Blamires, the last victim of Stephen's, we don't know too much about her, sadly. We do know that she was a sex worker and was also battling addiction like Susan and Shelley. And she may have actually known Shelley because they lived down the street from each other.
Okay.
And we know that her lifestyle of addiction and sex work made her vulnerable to a predator.
Right.
A predator of the worst kind, just like the other women. And actually, unlike the other 2 victims, Suzanne was held for 2 days, according to Stephen, before she was able to escape. She's the one who escaped out of his flat and ran down the hall and was captured on that CCTV footage.
Okay.
The other 2 women, he just brought back to his flat and murdered that day. So here we go. It's going to get dark. Stephen told investigators that he lured these women back to his flat under the guise that he'd be partaking in their services, and then he killed them with a crossbow and dismembered them in his bathtub. Yeah. He even took video of Shelley Armitage dead in his bathtub. He left his phone on a bus so that someone would find it.
What
and
in
see
the
this video.
world?
Yeah, he's sick. He's sick. And in the video, he calls himself the bloodbath artist.
Okay, the bloodbath. I think I've heard of that term before.
Well, his phone was found, but actually the person who found it just sold the phone. So they didn't see the video.
Whoa.
Until the authorities actually ended up tracking down the phone and recovering it, and that's when the police saw the video. And I'm sure that really pissed Stephen off because his plan was foiled. You know, he couldn't, some innocent person happening upon such a gruesome sight didn't work.
Yeah.
And I wish that was the worst part of the story, but it's just not. You're probably thinking, how could it get any worse? Well, he would keep certain parts of their body to eat later.
Candace, to eat?
To eat. To consume.
Mm-mm.
And the rest of the body parts he threw in the river air. I'm not sure which parts he deemed edible, but that's enough information on that. And in May, after searching the river tirelessly, they were able to locate some of Suzanne Blameyer's body and some of Shelley Armitage. And in fact, they only found what they referred to as a piece of tissue that was linked to Shelley Armitage. But no remains of Susan Rushworth were ever found. So we don't know what he did with her. Stephen acquired legal representation. In fact, it was the very same law firm who represented Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. He wanted notoriety, and he wanted the media to compare him with Peter Sutcliffe. He had no intention of fighting these charges or getting off in any way. He just wanted, like, that narrative floating around out there about him. Oh, it's, he's got Peter Sutcliffe's lawyer, blah, blah, blah. But in his first court appearance, when he was asked for his name, he stood and replied, "The Crossbow Cannibal."
So he named himself.
He gave himself the name,
wow,
The Crossbow Cannibal. There were audible gasps in the courtroom from the victims' families and even the magistrate, because, like I said, he idolized serial killers. The Yorkshire Ripper, Jack the Ripper. He gave himself this name for the media to refer to him as.
Right. I mean, he has
it was
said
sensational.
He has said from the beginning who he really is.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And boy, did the media use it. I mean, you cannot Google this guy's name without seeing Crossbow Cannibal attached to it. While in custody, Stephen actually attempted suicide multiple times. I wasn't able to locate details regarding those attempts. I'm using air quotes. But often when a person attempts suicide multiple times, they're not actually attempting to end their life. It's more of a, again, control thing. He wants people to tend to him, and now he's a victim. December 21st, 2010, he was convicted of all 3 murders after pleading guilty. I wasn't able to find much about the legal proceedings in this case. Like it was called a trial, but it didn't seem like there was much of a trial, considering he was arrested in May and then his trial was in December. He was convicted on December 21st. So, but really, what is there to say?
Right.
He'd confessed. Judge Justice Openshaw was quoted as saying, "The circumstances of these murders are so wicked and monstrous, they leave me in no doubt the defendant should be kept in prison for the rest of his life."
Right.
And with that, he was sentenced to a whole life term. And we have talked about this before, how life in prison in the UK is not actually life in prison.
Right.
But he was actually sentenced to life in prison. So,
I should hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so. And actually, you won't be surprised, but it will peeve you nonetheless to know that before the murders, he had been on a police watch list. While they weren't checking in with him, maybe parole-wise, he was being, I don't know, a watch list. I don't know what that means, but
they weren't watching him
before multiple times. Well, I guess his behaviors had authorities with raised eyebrows, but there was never anything that they caught him doing that was illegal. So he was free to roam.
Okay.
But there's no doubt in my mind that he would have continued terrorizing the community for much longer if he wasn't so arrogant and blatant about committing these crimes. He would have continued to kill vulnerable women. And as many women as he could before getting caught. I think Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, had killed 13 women before. But see, he was not cunning like his predecessors. He wasn't careful and
well thought out.
He wasn't smart. Jack the Ripper never got caught.
Right.
We don't know who Jack the Ripper ever was. So he wasn't smart enough to evade authorities for an extended period of time. He was careless and disorganized. And Stephen, he might be listening to this podcast right now because I can just imagine he's probably sitting in prison Googling his name every day. So he's going to see this episode.
Oh, people are still
and
talking
Stephen,
about
if you're listening, you're pathetic, mate. Okay? The families and friends of these 3 victims will never be the same. People like Peter Sutcliffe and Stephen Griffiths may look at sex workers as if they don't matter and they're disposable, but they are people's families and they are people.
They are.
And Susan Rushworth's family has never had that closure that they've been so desperate for. They don't have one single piece of their mother that has ever been found. And actually, in 2020, they were still begging Stephen Griffiths to tell them where their mom's remains were.
Oh, wow.
And he's just remained silent. Just one last expression of control that he can, have from behind bars.
That's disgusting.
This is sad. Susan's daughter, Kimberly, actually turned to sex work and drugs to cope with her mother's brutal murder.
Girlfriend.
So one tragedy leading to another. I couldn't find anything as far as what Kimberly is doing today, but I hope that she's getting help that she needs. I hope that all of these families are able to find some sort of closure. I cannot imagine the brutality, like losing your loved one in this way,
right.
Having them murdered and eaten.
No.
Like, it's
disturbing.
Cannibalism is next level to me. Dismemberment is unconscionable, but the fact that someone could be comfortable with having a dead body in front of them, but also taking the time to cut them up, it requires physical strength and stamina to do something like that.
Well, and he said it right when in his MySpace profile. I mean, it's demonic. I mean...
Yeah, exactly. But to consume... to eat someone's body.
No.
I mean, you're not on a desert island, man. Go down to the co-op and get a sandwich. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be demented to do something like that.
Yes. He is evil, 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 evil.
Yeah.
And with that, that's all I got.
Well,
I think that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, we can stop there.
Yeah, I think we should stop there. I don't want to give this person any more of my time, to be honest
that was
with you.
not fun. That was not fun. You said we'll do fun again later, but that was not fun.
Yeah, this was not fun, and I think I'm going to go take a shower, actually.
Yeah, okay.
I feel gross. But, this was great. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, not this, as we always say. I feel like we always say, not this one.
Not like this.
Oh, gosh.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you for listening to Cousins on Crime. If you're enjoying our podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating so that other true crime fans can find us.
If you have any case suggestions or just want to say hey, email us at cousinsoncrime@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we post case photos and information at Cousins on Crime Podcast.